Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udo Akamimo. Kenya, for the first time, has both a foreign and diaspora policy. Both were launched yesterday. And to tell us what difference they will make, we have the Political and Diplomatic Secretary, Ambassador Ben Ogutu, sitting in for the Cabinet Secretary, Ambassador Amina Mohammed, who, as we advertised, would be our guest. Unfortunately, she was called away due to a last-minute assignment. We also have in the Cheche studio the regular panel of Mutegi Njau of Royal Media Services and political analyst David Makali. Good morning and welcome to Cheche. So we have two policies to understand. Let's start with the foreign policy, because if Kenya now has this written document, which I see you have in front of you, how have we been interacting with other countries since independence?
Thank you very much, Udwak. First of all, for inviting the Cabinet Secretary to be here. Unfortunately, she was not due to matters beyond her control, but she asked me to step in for her. Yesterday, we launched the two very important documents on foreign policy and diaspora policy by His Excellency the President. I know to some people it's like, what has been there before and why have we not had a policy which is there? We've had a consistent foreign policy, only that this is the first time we're having a written foreign policy. Ever since our independence, we've been very consistent in our engagements with the world. We have put a lot of emphasis on sovereignty and territorial integrity, peaceful coexistence with our neighbors. We have had a lot of emphasis on our economic development. We, of course, subscribe to the United Nations and the AU charters. Our foreign policy has always been guided by the various documents that Kenya has: the Constitution, the various national development plans, the manifestos of the ruling party, and the regular periodic circulars and the pronouncements made by the executive. By and large, foreign policy is really a reflection of domestic policy. So what we'll be doing is projecting what we have as priorities domestically out there in the international arena. The coming in with this now written document as a foreign policy is really to provide guidelines on the areas that Kenya is going to pursue going forward. Right now, the articulation of foreign policy or the advancement of interests of the country out there is not just a preserve of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have other state actors.
Let me interrupt, because the point you're making is that Kenya has always had a foreign policy, and the only difference now is that you have a document that enshrines the values guiding that foreign policy.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? How has it evolved over the years? Because I seem to remember principles such as non-alignment, good neighborliness, non-intervention. Is that still the case, or what are we talking about now in Kenya's foreign policy?
Now we are talking about the same advancement of our interests that we've talked about. When you talked about the non-alignment in those days, there was clear divide between the East and the West.
The Cold War.
And yes, the Cold War. And what you're saying is that we are going to make friends with all our global partners, both in the East and the West. Now that that has died down, we are focusing more on what are the strategic partnerships that we can create with these partners who are either in the East or in the West. We are strengthening our historical ties with those that we have had since independence. We are spreading our tentacles to the new friends and coming out with a beneficial partnership that can help the country. In that regard, this foreign policy document clearly specifies and stipulates the areas in which we are going to be focusing on broadly, so that the other actors who are also helping us advance Kenya's interests, we've got the civil society, we've got the NGOs, we've got the other non-state actors, we've got the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself spearheading it, we've got other ministries in trade, in labor,
in a sense,
and
citizen
all that.
Diplomacy.
In a sense, so that we have a guiding document that all of them can read, so that when we're talking as a country, we are speaking from the same page. This foreign policy document identifies 5 key areas of peace diplomacy, Naturally, because of the situation where we are as a country, as I said, we have all along been a leading actor in peace mediation efforts in our sub-region, and even globally through the peacekeeping cooperation that we have been able to undertake, and even at the various multilateral settings by coming up with resolutions that address conflict situations. So our peace diplomacy is going to enhance our engagement in places like Somalia, in Sudan, because we believe that unless you have peace with your neighbors, unless you have peace, the much desired economic development and integration cannot take place. The second pillar is the economic diplomacy. Now, the economic diplomacy puts emphasis on what Kenya should do to enhance its interactions with the rest of the world, beginning with our neighbors, and African region, and the continent at large, and globally, to advance our economic interests, because what is important is trading with nations so that we can get more income, so that we can have more people employed, so that we can have more direct investment coming from outside. The third pillar is diaspora diplomacy, which maybe I'll be coming to elaborate on later when I talk about the diaspora diplomacy.
We'll come to that, yes.
Is how do we mainstream the diaspora into national development? As it is now, it's been recognized even within the African Union. And in 2003, we had a resolution that recognized the diaspora as the 6th region of Africa. Of course, we have the 5 regions, East, West, South, Central, and North. But now, because we have got a lot of Africans out there, something in excess of 30 million, they can still also do a lot to contribute to development of the African continent. Likewise, we in Kenya have also recognized that importance of the diaspora. We have some 3 million Kenyans who are out there. Many of them have got skills and expertise that have enabled them to penetrate the job market out there. But at the same time, they can also bring these ideas to help Kenya in its development aspirations. We also have what is called the environmental diplomacy as the 4th pillar. This is important, one, because Kenya is honored to host the only UN office in a developing world. Apart from New York, Geneva, and Vienna, the 4th is here. And one of the important programs that we're having is the UNEP. So it is incumbent upon us to lead by example. And now having that environmental diplomacy so that we put emphasis in sustainability and management of our resources for posterity, Kenya has got to take the lead. Then last, we have the cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy aims at creating better understanding and appreciation of the diversity of cultures in the world. We hope and we are committed and determined to show that by example, by using the diversity that we have in Kenya to advance the interests of all the ethnic groups of Kenya as one person, as one people, and as one nation. We also, of course, in the cultural diplomacy, we'll be relying a lot on our artists to promote and project a positive image of Kenya. We have our sportsmen who are our ambassadors by the way they excel. And this, I think, has gone a long way in making people appreciate Kenya, not only as a powerhouse, but as a country that can lead by example in projecting culture and art and sport as a very important component in helping, in bridging, and in enhancing international relations and
I must thank you for must thank you for a good exposition of those 5 pillars. I mean, I get the drift of it. Just to get into the meat of it, there is this thing about participation in policy making. How would you just sort of take us into how this policy was generated in terms of until it became a document? Who are involved? Was the public views taken in, and or experts and so forth, so that somebody doesn't come up and say, look, this policy again is strange to us, you know, as happens.
When it became expedient that we need to have a policy, a guiding document on how we relate with the rest of the world.
Why?
Because, as I said, there are most non-state and non-state actors who have come into play. And when we are there out of Kenya in the global arena, we feel that Kenya is advancing the interests of its people, both in the country and outside there. So we need to identify what are our priorities that we need to be talking about. And these priorities are spelled out in the various domestic documents that you have had that spell out Kenya's development aspirations and priorities. And that's why I said our foreign policy heavily borrows, as it is now, from the current Jubilee Manifesto, as it is from the new constitutional dispensation, as it is from the Vision 2030, and also other pronouncements and documentation that we, the Kenyans, have participated in coming up with. So our domestic documentation documents that chart out the path of development in Kenya have actually been participatory by Kenyans. So what we're doing as a foreign ministry, we are borrowing from that, synthesizing, and then we have had various fora in which we have engaged various ministries and agencies of the government, and they have had the input in it. We have engaged non-state actors, the civil service organizations. We have sent out documentation, invited their input. We have reached out to the diaspora through our missions abroad so that they can also share what it is that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has initiated and invited input. And then this input came back here. We have shared this also with the people's representatives. First of all, beginning with the Departmental Committee on the Defense and Foreign Relations, because that is the arm of, in Parliament that we relate with. This document has also been shared and also been made available also to the Parliament, therefore, to also give in the input as people's representation. And other ordinary citizens. Workshops have been held in various stages. We have had consultants, because we're also borrowing from what we think would be best practices. If you look at the document, it is only it's only 32 pages. Now this means that the guiding principles are what is important. The rest of how you implement will be dependent on different circumstances as and when they arise.
Let's talk about the 5 pillars. Previously, you used to have an ambassador posted in a station. Then you have people to implement those sectors. For instance, you used to have economic or business attaché, education attaché. Are you going to have people representing those issues in embassies?
What we have is that it is not possible to have a whole government posted to diplomatic missions abroad. Kenya cannot sustain it. Kenya cannot afford it.
So how will you implement that?
The route we have taken is we did some years back what is called a very comprehensive rationalization exercise.
Right.
So that we identify our missions and determine what is optimal staff level and what category and specialization of staff required there, so that those staff are posted there. We now have what is called a Foreign Service Institute. It is an institute that trains our diplomats, because diplomats, as they join, they come from diverse backgrounds and professions and experiences, and also hold different qualifications. But when you're a diplomat there, you're supposed to be doing what is called whole government diplomacy. So you're supposed to be very well versed in all issues that Kenya is aspiring to achieve, be it the political, economic, and social spheres. Diplomats, when they join Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they go through an induction course at the Foreign Service Institute. After that, there are opportunities for further training in areas of specialization, in skills, acquisition of diplomacy, training, in negotiation techniques, in areas that Kenya would be advancing or advocating for out there. Where we have specific areas that we want to tap, say like in the area of commerce, we have commercial attachés. Those commercial attachés are now within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because if you look at the current government and the mandate of the ministry, we are now also dealing with matters of trade. So we've got, that's why it's called Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. So those that used to be in the Ministry of Trade, they're actually under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So where the expertise is required from them, we get them, we train them as diplomats, and then they're posted out to specific stations.
But some of these ambassadors or envoys that we appoint, some of them are old people who have failed politicians. Now you take them to their institute. What do you tell them? People who are 70 years old and whatever, and train them to be what?
The saying goes, age is wisdom. The older you go, you get, the more wise you become.
I don't know.
And I'm sure you also.
Let's rephrase the question.
Maybe just
there's something in there that Mutegi is asking. Where you have people who are not necessarily perhaps qualified for their posts, but are being sent out as ambassadors, as diplomats, as political rewards.
For rewards.
You remember the chief architect of Kenya's foreign policy is the president himself. Minister for Foreign Affairs and her staff work on delegation. The appointment is therefore by His Excellency the President, and they are personal representatives of the President. But you will also appreciate that in the current constitutional dispensation, Parliament has a very important role in vetting.
The Parliament also experiences tyranny of numbers.
So granted, this is something now political, so it's not, I cannot comment much on what is tyranny of numbers and what is not there. But these are the people that we have vested with our confidence as the people of Kenya to do the vetting for us. The president will, of course, choose in his own wisdom, but we'll also get people who will add value to the foreign policy of Kenya's articulation, and also advancing the interests of Kenya in the respective stations.
Some of them just look like just people. They're human beings there, not adding any value to us.
So I would not want to pass judgment on them, because for us, Parliament has done the job of vetting, the President has appointed, but you also remember that the structure of a mission and how it operates, the head of mission is simply the one who is recognized as representing the President. And he knows what the President wants to achieve. And what the President wants to achieve is clearly spelled out in this documentation that we have. We also now have under him staff who are professionals, the technical staff, who are multi-skilled. One of the things that we're actually talking about in this Foreign Service Institute is whoever is a product of the Foreign Service Institute must be multi-skilled and will be able to perform multitasks, so they can be able to do the work of the mission.
Of course, not everything. That is why we have different attachés. You know, there will be always a defense, there will be cultural, and commercial, and so forth. In fact, since you've been one such diplomat, let's just sort of, in a nutshell, look at the structure of our Kenyan mission abroad. You'll have the ambassador. Typically, what will you have, and how big will that team be? Because we've had claims about our missions there being full of people who are just, you know, a lot of subordinate staff and, you know, a lot of baggage, so to speak.
There was a time, in fact, the ambassadors used to go with the cooks. And
there was a particular minister's tenure when that really became public, about a public issue. I don't want to name him. But just typically, what do we expect in our mission, Kenyan mission abroad? And how large is this mission? Take, for example, an average country like Japan and a country like Burundi, you know.
Maybe I could give some examples of 3 key stations.
Yes.
One, I will take a mission in a multilateral setting, like New York. I'll take Burundi, which is one of East African partner states.
Yes.
And I'll maybe talk of Japan, because that's where I've just come from. And it's a very important economic partner of Japan, of Kenya. New York is the biggest multilateral station, the biggest UN office in the world. And the work of the UN is such that they have various committees that are dealing with different kinds of issues, ranging from security to budgetary to economic matters to social matters. Ideally, an officer would be able to cover each of those. So you're talking about 6 officers for the commission, for the committees. Then you have the ambassador, the deputy ambassador. Depending on the nature of work that we're also doing, for example, in 97, 98, when we were members of the United Nations Security Council, when we had a non-permanent seat, we had extra 5 staff because of the Security Council matters that were very pressing. And as you know, almost 80% of the issues in the United Nations Security Council is African issues. That's where most of the conflicts occur. So you have to beef up to be able to perform as a mission. Japan is our #1 trading partner, #1 development partner. And even if you look at in terms of ODA, it still ranks the highest. If you look at the areas in which we can benefit from Japan, technological transfer, if you look at the FDI that should be coming from Japan, it is colossal. So that also means that we are going to have more staff there. The average staff complement which we had was the ambassador. You have the deputy ambassador, who also doubled as head of chancery and also economic counselor. Because by and large, what we're doing in Japan is economic issues,
yes.
Trade and investment.
Right.
Then you have the establishment of a diplomatic station is by and large a political statement of the relationship that you have. So you have an officer below who would also be now dealing directly on bilateral matters over and above the economic issues.
Yeah.
We have what is called the technical and administrative staff. These are staff whose work is to run the mission. The administrative attaché, who is in charge of the registry, in charge of day-to-day administrative matters of the mission, and of course the financial attaché, the one in charge of the finances.
Yeah.
All the missions are also allowed, depending on the degree of work and depending on the importance of the station, a certain number, complement of what is called local staff. Local staff were engaged locally, and these are the ones that are the clerks, the ones that you have like drivers, and in some cases, like in Japan, where we have a lot of promotion of tourism and a lot of commercial matters, we have an assistant who is dealing with trade matters. Now, you mentioned about baggage to missions. And you're right, there was a time that we used to have cooks, drivers, being posted to our missions abroad. Ambassador had that, an ambassador. That had to be stopped because whether you like it or not, you're going to foreign land, and the amount of money you're going to spend on a diplomat is the same amount of money you're going to spend on the support staff of the ambassador. In some stations like Japan, that could be as high as 30 million in a year. It wasn't making sense because there's no value they're adding to the core functions and activities and operations of the mission.
Yeah.
So it was decided that no more posting of cooks, no more posting of drivers. Again, it was a very, very genuine and very practical decision. Because if you're going to a country where the Kiswahili is not spoken, English is not spoken, of what use is a driver who cannot communicate? Of what use is a maid who cannot communicate, even hold the phone? So that is no longer there, so there's no longer any baggage. If anything...
So roughly, what is the staff complement in a mission as important as Japan?
Like
How many?
Like in Japan, we have 6 home-based officers.
Yes.
6 home-based officers.
Our embassy in Japan has 6.
Has 6 home-based officers.
But the whole mission?
We are making a case for 1 more, and then 8 support staff. That is the local staff.
Yeah.
We are making a case, like in Japan, to add additional staff. And this is part of the rationalization that we have.
Yeah, to make like how many roughly?
To make like now 7.
In total, about 16?
About 16.
Okay, let's look at Burundi now, which is near here and engaging East African missions.
Burundi now has an ambassador. We'll have a deputy ambassador who is also ambassadorial level. And then we have 2 diplomats. And then over and above that, we're going to have now the technical staff from home, who are the administrative attaché and also the financial attaché.
Okay.
Right.
We'll drill down further on this after this break. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. How will the newly launched foreign and diaspora policies help Kenya and Kenyans? Our guest today is the Political and Diplomatic Secretary from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Ben Ogutu. You can SMS your questions and opinions for him to SMS number 22422, or you can tweet us. Our address is @Cheche_TV.